When the COVID-19 pandemic began, researchers and public health experts warned us that the earliest possible window for a vaccine would be the end of 2020. They also cautioned us that vaccine development takes time, and it could be much longer than that. But in the closing weeks of the year, two vaccines, one from pharma companies Pfizer and BioNTech, one from Moderna, began rolling out in some parts of the world. They weren't the first worldwide, but they were, in a sense, the first of their kind. And like Babe Ruth calling his shot, it seems a little like the experts knew how this was gonna go. And that's because a technology decades in the making was finally able to rise to the occasion just when we needed it most. This is the story of how a new vaccine technology based on RNA came to be. And if it continues to prove safe and effective, it won't just be for COVID, it will be a major change in the way we design all vaccines in the future. Now we're gonna cover a lot of
usually a very lengthy process, taking on average 8 years to get approved. Since a few years, we have the ability to create mRNA vaccines, which can be developed much faster. So how do these vaccines work? Are they safe, and how do they compare to traditional ones? But first you must understand how the immune system works. When a virus enters your body, it will attach itself to one of your cells and inject its DNA or RNA into it. This is like a blueprint for your cells, containing instructions on what the cell has to make. So in this case, the virus's RNA will tell your cell to make more copies of the same virus. They become factories, assembling new copies of the virus that can infect even more cells. But don't worry, our bodies have a defense system for foreign intruders. The immune system attacks any protein, virus, or bacteria that does not belong in our bodies. But it takes a few days for it to learn how to attack the intruder. Meanwhile, the virus factories are running non-stop, quickly replicating the virus and spreading it in your body. In other words, you start experiencing symptoms of whatever has infected you. After a few days, however, your immune system will have figured out how to attack the virus and will start producing antibodies. These attach themselves to the virus, preventing them from infecting more cells and marking them for destruction. As you can see, the immune system is remarkable, but it's slow to mount an attack. That is the reason why we can get sick in the first place. So to give it a helping hand, we developed vaccines. The main idea is to train your immune system to recognize and fight off an infection before it has occurred. Almost like showing your immune system a mugshot of the virus and saying, if you see this, kill it. There are various types of vaccines, but let's take a look at the new kid on the block. mRNA vaccines. To understand how they work, let's take the COVID-19 pandemic as an example. You might have seen pictures of the virus with its distinctive spikes. These spikes allow the virus to attach to specific cells in your body and infect them. Now, here's the key idea for the COVID-19 vaccine. What if we could train our immune system to recognize these spikes by having our own bodies produce them? To do that, researchers took the virus's blueprint, its RNA, and isolated the part responsible for producing the spikes. Armed with this blueprint, they created mRNA, or messenger RNA. This is a special form of RNA that can enter your cells and give them instructions. In this case, the RNA contains instructions to build the spikes of the coronavirus. Not the virus itself, just the spikes. So mRNA vaccines contain instructions for your cells that tell them to build a part of a virus in large volumes, almost like giving them a recipe to follow. Once this is happening, your immune system kicks into action and starts learning how to attack these intruders. Again, it takes some time for the immune system to fight off these spikes, but you won't get sick because it's only the spikes, not the virus itself. And that's it. Your immune system has learned how to attack the spikes of the coronavirus. It destroys all the spikes and even breaks down the mRNA vaccine itself. The only thing left in your body are special B cells or memory cells. These can linger around for months or years until the same virus infects you again. When that happens, the B cells can produce the correct antibodies right away, preventing the virus from spreading and making you sick. What's interesting about this mRNA technique is that it's relatively quick to develop a vaccine as soon as we know the DNA or RNA sequence of a virus. And secondly, because the vaccine only makes our bodies produce a tiny part of a virus, we cannot get sick from it. More traditional vaccines use weakened versions of the actual virus. This also triggers an immune response, but could also give you mild symptoms. Now you know how mRNA vaccines work.
This strategy is faster than more traditional approaches, which often involve generating weakened or inactivated forms of a live virus, or making large amounts of the spike protein to determine whether they can prompt an antibody response. Once a potential vaccine is discovered, a number of checkpoints exist before it can be administered to people. First are preclinical tests, which involve experiments in a laboratory and with animals. Scientists must ensure the vaccine candidate is not only effective, but also safe. For example, an antibody response to an imperfect vaccine could, under extremely rare circumstances, end up increasing the danger of becoming infected. When the potential vaccine achieves the necessary preclinical results, clinical trials can begin in a small group of people. As the vaccine candidate advances, it is tested on increasing numbers of people, with scientists and doctors closely monitoring safety, efficacy, and dosing. Upon successful completion of clinical trials, the vaccine candidate must be reviewed and approved by regulatory agencies such as the FDA before large-scale manufacturing and distribution gets underway and the licensed vaccine is administered widely.
So even though the Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines were the first mRNA vaccines to be authorized, researchers had been excited about the potential of this technology and had been working on it for decades. It's true that we've thrown a lot of money and person hours at stopping this pandemic, and without that investment, we probably would not be seeing mRNA vaccines just yet. Some efforts to create other mRNA vaccines had already been abandoned, and mRNA vaccines were never considered a sure thing. We had to do the testing, which is why it took until late 2020, but there was an existing body of research to draw from, including into other major coronavirus diseases, SARS and MERS. What researchers learned allowed them to create these new COVID vaccines even faster. In one sense, these COVID vaccines were an explosive development, an incredibly swift global collaboration in the name of human health, something that feels to me on the scale of an Apollo mission. But all science is incremental. It always builds on the dedicated work of generations of researchers, and it never happens in a vacuum. In fact, multiple mRNA vaccines for other viral and bacterial diseases, and even for some cancers, are undergoing human trials. Now that mRNA vaccines are working, it's likely they will keep working, and that is great news for all of us. Thanks